Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Andy Fell and I'm the founder of Gift 631. It gives me great pleasure today to be joined by the one and only Grant Hackett, Order of Australian Medal. Now, I know we do have members from around the world, and there may be one or two who are wondering, who is Grant Hackett? Well, Grant is one of the most famous swimmers of all time, represented Australia and won a total of 58 medals, 36 of which were gold. And over his career, he broke 16 world records. And Grant's most famous achievements would be in the marathon of swimming, which is the 1500 meters, winning gold in his home Olympics in Sydney, and then repeating that feat in Athens. Grant was undefeated in the 1500 meters from 1997 to 2007. He also became the captain of the Australian leadership team. No surprise to me, having worked with Grant in business for a while. He's got incredible leadership skills as well. And he was also the World Swimmer of the Year, which is no mean feat when you think of characters like Michael Phelps and others in Thorpe who've been around through Grant's career. After transitioning out of the pool, Grant went into business, held senior roles in marketing, wealth, distribution with Westpac and BT. And then he moved on to Generation Life, where he is now the CEO and managing director. And I'm delighted to see that the performance of Generation Life is soaring to new heights as well. So Grant, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be talking to you once again.
Oh, great to be on board with you today, Andy. It's been a while.
It's been too long, mate. It's been too long. I think it's because I'm 5'8" and you're 6'6". So, I have to keep my distance maybe. But Grant, I'd like to start by giving you the opportunity to, I've obviously picked out, the highlights in terms of the outputs, the achievements, but what is the Grant Hackett story as told by Grant Hackett?
Yeah, well, it's really simple. I think for me, nothing was from great design. Everything for me kind of happened by default. It was more my personality that probably drove me to the place that I'm in today in terms of whether it's my sporting or my business career. So I was always a very competitive person, so it put me in a competitive environment, and I always wanted to win. And I was always willing to do whatever it took to win in terms of the training or the preparation and the execution for a race or anything else that I was kind of challenging myself around. And the only reason I got into aquatics or water sport was because of my brother. So my dad was a policeman. We moved around quite a bit as he used to get transferred and promoted. We moved up to North Queensland and we joined the local surf club up there called the Eddie Bay Surf Club. He decided to do the surf race. My brother, who's 6.5 years older than me, so he was 10, I was 4, and he actually did quite well. Mum and Dad were interested in football and tennis and played, sports on land. They didn't do anything when it came to aquatics. And he finished third. I thought, geez, he did pretty well. But my brother, who is super competitive as well and, big, tall, athletic-looking character, he's 6'4", and even more athletic than me, I'd have to say, in terms of coordination and speed and things like that. He finished third, but he got beaten by 2 girls. And being super, super competitive, he was like, I need to do some swimming lessons. And that's where sort of swimming came into play. Within 6 months, he was state surf champion. And I was the 4-year-old going down to the pool with him, jumping in the public lanes, going up and down, learning how to swim, kind of just enjoying myself. Then one day when I was 5, the Red Devils Swimming Club, it was called in Innisfail, they had a race for 5-year-olds. A lot of the competitions don't start until you're 6 or 7, but they had a race for 5-year-olds. And apparently I did this race. I can't even remember this. My mum tells me this story. And I touched the wall at the end of this race and I popped my head up and I yell out, did I win? And apparently I won by like half a lap. And my mum kind of faded back into the crowd, she said, because she was like, who is this kid? Like, she goes, because you almost seemed docile. Like, you were just so relaxed. Nothing seemed to faze you. But then all of a sudden you got into this competition. And then you didn't even stop to look around. You touched the wall and you yelled out, and everybody across the entire stadium heard what you said. And so I think Mum and Dad got a real shock of, I guess, that underlying character and probably drive that I had. And I think for me, it was just one thing after the other. And that's all it is. It's just incremental steps. And I used to love watching my brother compete because he was such a champion. He won, races at national level. He was world Ironman champion. There was a very famous Ironman series in Australia called the Uncle Toby Super Series, and they were like rock stars here. He did that for 8 years. The guy that finished second to me in Sydney, who won the previous two Olympics, Kieran Perkins in 1996 and 1992, and was a world record holder in my pet event, my brother used to beat as a 13, 14-year-old. They were number one, number two rivals. So I knew about Kieran Perkins for a long time. But for me, I was doing three sports. And, I loved my rugby league because we were living in Queensland. It was a very popular sport. I played that for 7 years. I loved the Ironman because my brother was doing that, and I used to look up to all these heroes from the surf clubs around Australia, and I really wanted to participate in that sport as well. And then I was doing swimming. And then one day in 1993, Juan Antonio Samaranch, the IOC president at the time, read out, and the winner is Sydney. And this is 1993. I'm 13 years of age, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to have an Olympics in our own country. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be 20 years of age, so I'm going to be, not quite prime, but I'm going to be in a perfect position to be able to have an opportunity to compete there if I'm good enough. And I was like, that's it. I want to go to an Olympics. And I don't want to just go to an Olympics. I want to win. And I thought that back then. I swear on the life of my mum and dad and every family member, my goal wasn't to go to the Olympics. My goal was to win the Olympics. As soon as that announcement was made. And obviously I couldn't do that for the other two sports. And as Trevor Hendy said to me, who was a very famous Australian Ironman, he said, you can be good at a lot of sports, but you can be elite at one. And it's always stuck with me that, it's kind of like you can master one thing or you can be a jack of all trades. So you got to just kind of pick and choose. And I thought, that's it. I'm doing swimming and I'm going to do everything I can to be the very, very best in the world. And what I did was I thought, well, who is the best in the world at the time at the event that I want to go to the Olympics for? And it was Kieran Perkins. So I went and researched all of his times, and there wasn't Google. I didn't have the luxury of a search engine to, find all this guy's times across every age group category, every single distance that he swum. I actually went about going through like piles and piles and piles of magazines, of swimming magazines that are collected from here, there, and everywhere to find his times for every single distance. And then I wrote them down, and then I went, right, every single year my goal is to either better that time or emulate that time and then try and step it up. And his improvement rates, I mean, this guy was the Olympic champion and world record holder, were incredible, were very intimidating. But that was kind of the very brief journey of really getting into swimming and the reason that I wanted to go to the Olympics. And it was kind of, it was pretty simple for me. Like the formula was, well, I want to be the best. What does the best do? Okay, they do that. So just try and do that, but just do it a little bit better. And that's kind of how I pursued the sport.
I mean, I absolutely love the simplicity and the clarity of that goal-setting approach. I've always admired your absolute focus. One of the things I'd love to just zone in on, many of the members, they're great, and this is the feedback they share with me. They're great in everyday situations, but when there's a bit of a pressure situation, they can freeze or they can get distracted. Before a major final, so maybe 2000, maybe 2004, maybe when you smashed the world record in Montreal in 2005 in the 800. How does Grant Hackett zone in? How do you push all these distractions away and really focus and be in the moment?
Yeah. This is a really interesting question for me because I think it's something that I'm naturally very good at just in terms of the way my genetics or psychology or whatever is built inside me. Because when I get closer to a bigger moment, I get more relaxed and more focused just naturally. And I always have. If I stab my toe or I hit my shin on a tow bar, I will say every swear word under the sun. And I get frustrated at little things really easy, but put me in, the middle of a nuclear war and I'll know exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it and do it relaxed. I just seem to be that type of personality. So you kind of got to know what you're naturally good at and what you're not good at. And it's the little things for me that I actually have to work on as a person. Like I shouldn't get frustrated at those sorts of things. I can be a better person like that. Put me in an Olympic final or a high pressure situation. I think I'm so good in those types of situations because of my preparation and the belief that I have in my preparation. So I've always had that strong sense of belief that I can do the things that I really set out to achieve if I do everything right amongst all the little steps that you have to do in a very long and arduous and challenging preparation, which, to give people an idea of that, I basically swam from Sydney to LA and halfway back every 4 years to train for Olympics. And I couldn't just swim it. I had to swim it faster than anybody else in the world for my event. So that's what it was like for me. So I think for me, when I'm coming into, say, an Olympic final, one of those really high pressure situations, for me, I really try and break everything down to something very, very specific. Sorry about that. I just had a bit of an interruption on the call. I try and break everything down to very, specific things that need to be done. What time do I need to start stretching? What time do I need to enter the warm down pool? What time do I need to, see the masseuse? What time do I need to get to the marshalling area? When do I put my suit on? Everything for me is really, really structured, but I'm also good at going, if it doesn't perfectly go to plan, that's okay. If there's something that happens that I can't control, that's still okay. So I make sure I have everything really structured and planned out and clearly articulated in my head and written down as well and agreed to with my coach. And then I just go through those processes. And I find that makes me very relaxed. I find that methodical process and focus and belief then in the entire preparation that I've had over many months or even years in a lot of cases puts me in a really good frame of mind. And look, sometimes it doesn't go well. Sometimes you can be in the middle of a warm-up and you're hitting times with way too much effort for that particular time. And so for me, I had this one situation where I just couldn't hit the right times in the warm-up. And I was it was doing my head in a bit. I wasn't quite relaxed. I wasn't my normal self going into that race, but I kind of always managed to just let go of everything once I'm up on the blocks and just focus on the execution. I was good at that. And I did that for that particular race. And I nearly broke the world record. And I wasn't in world record form. It wasn't like I was tapered and rested and shaved down. And I thought to myself, you know what? I actually don't need everything to go perfect in a warm-up to do an amazing race. So it gave me this other sense of belief or insight or new perspective just on that too. And I think that's where I learned that, hey, if you've done the work overall, if things aren't necessarily going right in the lead up, if you can have that ability to let go and almost, it's not the not care, but it's like whatever happens will happen. I just need to focus on the execution now and do the very best I can. That alleviates a lot of pressure, but it also allows you to focus on the right things around the execution too. Because I find what a lot of people do, why they stuff up in the moment, is they keep thinking about stuffing up in the moment and keep thinking about what's going to go wrong. Where if you take a mindset and you go, I've done everything now, no one can help me now, it's all over, I'm just going to do the very best I can. You kind of relax for a little bit because you go, whatever the outcome is, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, life's going to go on. So you kind of take that pressure off. But then you find yourself really focusing on what matters. And you're focusing on the execution, listening to the start gun, getting the underwater right, getting the technique right, whatever it is for a particular event. And so I think I was naturally good at bigger situations than what I am in smaller situations, but I think I really learned to refine my process over time, and I really took notice of what I was good at and what I wasn't so good at too, and I always continued to try and improve that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that about mastery of the basics, consistently practicing and improving upon the absolute basics. The other thing, I was listening to Michael Phelps, who I know you know very, very well and was spent some time with in Arizona. He was talking about one of his things is what matters now, and you've really articulated that beautifully well, Grant, that whatever's gone has gone and whatever's going to be is going to be, but it's what matters now. It's about being 100% focused and present in the moment. But I also heard that at times his coach would look to do something to throw him off, like tread on his goggles just before, and then Michael's got to go, right, what matters now? Okay, I've either got to swim with broken goggles or swim without goggles. So just to almost throw him off in case something did happen in the warm-up or there was an incident that he couldn't control, so he could get his mind back on the job in hand. And how did you handle it?
I have to say something, because you reminded me of a story, because you're right, I've spent a lot of time, I've lived with Michael on a couple of occasions, and there's this story he was telling when we were at ASU, at Arizona State, and we're in the middle of the basketball court, and he's in the middle there, it's a big Coliseum-like area, and he's giving the story about the Olympics, and he shares a story of the 200-meter butterfly in 2008 when he won the eight gold medals, something that I don't think we'll ever see repeated. Never say never, but just an amazing feat. And I think this was probably his 5th gold medal he was going for at the time. And he dived in, and his goggles leaked. He couldn't see. Like, can you imagine being at that level and being that good, and you do a mistake that a 7-year-old makes? It's like your goggles are going to come down around your neck. And it's really funny because he could have panicked. And what actually happened is he said he did panic for a second, because in butterfly, you've got to get the touches right, because you have to touch with both hands. It's not like freestyle where you can flip. You've actually really got to get it right. So your vision is very important in that particular race. And what he did was he ended up closing his eyes and counting his strokes, because he was so well prepared. He knew exactly how many strokes he was going to do, where he was in the pool, how he was moving. Intuitively, he had everything so well trained that he then ended up breaking the world record that was then held for almost the next decade, and winning, I think, his 5th out of his 8 gold medals at that particular point in time. And I said to him after that speech, when we're on the way home, I said, were you just kind of making that up a little bit? Were you pushing the boundaries? He goes, no, that's exactly what I did. I closed my eyes and I counted my strokes the whole way through. And that was the result. So it says a lot about believing in your preparation and being so well prepared. It doesn't matter what anybody throws at you. You're ready to take it, absorb it, and move forward. And you just reminded me of that story, because it exemplifies that exact thing that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that is just a phenomenal story. Grant, I mean, you obviously clearly had an amazing swimming career, but how did you bounce back from the occasional disappointment? Lots of people going through very, very challenging times at the moment for various reasons. So we talk a lot about resilience, but we also talk about bounce back ability. So how does Grant Hackett bounce back?
It's really funny, because most people, when they view success, all they get to see is a success, right? Kelly Slater winning his 11th world title, Michael Phelps winning 8 gold medals, Roger Federer, taking out another Grand Slam. I don't know, Nadal on clay. It's one of those things where you think those types of individuals are almost impervious to having failure. Like, it just doesn't happen to them. But it's not that at all. I kind of, over time, have worked this out, that what great champions do really well is they all fail, and they all fail consistently. What their ability is that's different to most people is the way they get themselves back up. So their time frame from absolute failure to getting back up is very, very quick. Where other people either stay down at failure and feel sorry for themselves, or come up a little bit, or are just satisfied with mediocre, or kind of never get back there, and they just have a different thought pattern. Where a lot of people who fail that of that sort of nature, they go, right, what did I learn? What do I need to do? And I've got to get back there fast. And they get themselves off that plateau of feeling sorry for themselves. They go through the motions really, really quickly. And I think for me, probably one of the times where I was able to move through that V-shaped recovery, you could call it, and continue to move forward, was probably 2004, where I swam with a partially collapsed lung because I got pneumonia from overtraining. Went to the Olympics, wanted to win 3 gold medals. That was my objective. I had 2 silver medals, both by about 0.1 of a second, so 0 margin, just basically touching the wall together, but I was on the wrong side of that. Then I had my main race, which is what I mostly prepared for, the 1,500 meter freestyle. Did the heat swim, couldn't win the heat. I don't think I'd even lost a heat in 8 years at that particular point in time, rather than just a final. And I remember going around the corner and I just slumped down after doing a few media interviews, and I had my head in my hands, and my coach whacked me on my shoulder and he said, "You okay?" And I said, "It's over." I said, "We might as well go home." I said, "There's no way I can improve 20 seconds tomorrow night. I just don't have the ability. I don't have that race in me. These guys are way too quick." Like every negative thought you could ever have, I was having. So we all kind of crash and burn. And then, I still did everything professionally, though. I think that's probably another difference. You don't just throw, the sort of baby out with the bathwater. You still warm down. You still, do the nutrition, do everything right. And then I got into the afternoon, and a lot of people back home here in Australia knew something wasn't right, and they were texting me quite a bit. And I thought to myself, look, I just don't need the distraction. Turn the phone off. Only speak to family. That's it. Then I got to the point where I slowly started coming around. I thought, you know what? I haven't spent the last 4 years of my life training for this event just to throw it away. And so you start having these, positive thoughts, right? And I think the average person has one positive thought to 7 negative thoughts, right? So we're really good at beating ourselves up. I was probably maxing out at a 100-to-1 ratio at one stage there. So I was being super hard on myself. And then I just made this underlying ethos up that every time I have that negative thought and question myself and my ability right now, I'm just going to say whatever it takes. I want to win this race so badly. I haven't lost in 8 years. I'm still capable. People don't realize how sick I am. I didn't even realize how sick I was at that stage, that, half my lung was actually sitting up in a ball because it was blocked with so much mucus. It wasn't even, sitting out. So I wasn't getting that oxygen saturation. And every time one of those thoughts popped in, it was whatever it takes. I shaved my head and I just did everything right. And so I shifted that psychology from basically giving up to basically telling myself every time I even think about giving up, whatever it takes. And I just kept reiterating that message to myself, had a very clear race strategy. Long story short, ended up winning that race. The guy who finished second broke the American record, I think, that day by 11 seconds. I had to break the Olympic record to win that particular race. The guy I beat is a freak. He's a multiple Olympic medalist. He ended up being the chief and commander of SEAL Team 5 after he finished up in swimming. He's got like an MBA from Stanford, runs a big fund in a Silicon Valley, like just a serial high achiever and stops at nothing. So that's the sort of people that you're up against in that Olympic environment. But, that's probably the best example I can personally give of, feeling like, I've really failed and I've got nothing left to being able to get myself back up on top. And people just saw the moment of the winning there, right? But if they saw the 24 hours before that, they'd go, God, we're all just the same. We all go through the same stuff. Some people just have a better ability to be able to start to shift it quicker and get the self-belief back, I think, a little bit quicker.
Which again, I think comes back to a lot of the years and years and years of preparation and mastery. Now, I do want to talk for a few minutes around leadership, but also transition. I'll never forget one day when we were working together, I get a call from Catherine Bates, who was a world champion Australian cyclist. And she says to me, any chance you can set me up for a conversation with Grant Hackett? She goes, because I admire him so much, the way he's transitioned from swimming to corporate life and corporate leadership. And it was just a wonderful moment to understand the high esteem that people who are world champion level athletes held you in, because you're able to make such a successful transition. And there's many people now, again, around the world who are considering, maybe it's the impact of everything that's happened this year, considering a big transition themselves, or maybe they're forced into a transition because of, redundancy or being stood down or whatever it might be. So what was your kind of mindset about transitioning from one highly successful career into another? How did you manage that transition?
It was probably, on the outside, you make it look easier than what it is. The first thing about any transition is you've got to try and let go of the ego as quick as you can, because the reality was, in my sport, I was kind of like the global CEO. I was undefeated for over a decade, and achieved a lot of things that people hadn't achieved in the sport before. So I was kind of sitting in this, amazing position. And then I went into banking, which I was always fascinated by things outside of swimming because I had very good parenting. My dad said, you retire to something as an athlete, not from something.
Right.
So that was good guidance. And I knew, if you're a person that loves purpose and drive, you've got to go into something else that's going to give you that passion and drive and pursuit of excellence, I guess you could say. But I was global CEO over here, and then I walked into Collins Street on a Monday morning, and I wasn't the best at the table. And that sucked, like real bad. Like I hated that feeling. And I figured out straight away, I was like, well, you know what? Get rid of the ego for a second. Why don't you just look at all the different people within the bank that are exceptional at what they do, watch how they lead, watch how they manage people, look at the successful one. And I also make a point of looking at the people who aren't so good too, because I actually like to understand the behaviors of failure just as much as I do success. And I do that with bosses. I've done it my entire career because I look at, and you were my boss at one stage, and I look at every boss and I go, what do they do well? What do they do poorly? Because you know what? I can take some really good stuff from them, and then I can put it into myself if I get the opportunity to be in their position or a similar sort of position. And I've done that with every single leader that I've ever been managed by or met throughout business and sport. I look at their good characteristics and their poor characteristics. So I think I kind of got to know the lay of the land very, very quickly because I was able to check my ego at the door. And I think as soon as I ate humble pie, I started moving into a position that I was proud of much, much quicker. I also took it upon myself. A lot of people said, oh, you're Grant Hackett. You don't need to go and have a degree or do a postgraduate degree and do all this. And I was like, why am I different to anybody else? Like these people that are super successful, that are sitting in these amazing positions, doing these amazing things, all have studied hard. Why am I any different? I've just got a different path of getting there. So, I took it upon myself to make sure that I got the right education, the right courses, and, got the right mentoring in place. And I think that put me in a position, and that drive put me in a position where I was then able to get into a people leadership position where I could actually make an influence, make a difference, got to understand the lay of the land. How do the dynamics of this environment and what's the definition of success in this environment actually look like? And then what is the underlying drivers that you need to put in place to actually achieve that? And what I really learnt I think I always knew and understood and appreciated this in sport, but it's a different sort of dynamic, the team around you, because you're executing on your own in swimming. There is a team around you the whole time though. Like it's only the execution part where you're executing the whole time in business with a team the whole time. So you've got to make sure that team is on that journey the whole time and they have the same level of belief in what you're doing and trying to achieve that you do. So I really found that as an important element, particularly with your direct reports, that they have to be all going in the same direction as you. Otherwise, if you have one toxic person in there, it impacts the whole team and it can really undo everything really, really quickly. And people ask me, because they seem to think that I have no issue in letting people go if they're not doing a good job. They seem to think I can do that, not easily, but they seem to think I can execute it easier than what they can do it. They think that's the hardest thing in the world. And it is. Firing someone is a really difficult thing to do. It's the worst part of the job. And I said, look, I don't look like I'm firing an individual or terminating someone. What I do is I try and step them up. And I give them all the chances in the world and I have all the conversations and I give absolute clarity on what needs to be done and what needs to be achieved. But then if that person doesn't choose to make that shift, I look at it as my job in a leadership position to go, I've got, a couple of hundred people here or however many staff you might have in your organization that are relying on that individual to play their role in that team so they can do a better job in their roles, provide for their families, and this can be a great business. So if I'm in the position where I've got to manage this person and I don't either move them up or move them on, I'm doing the wrong thing by all these other people. So I always take it upon myself to always look at the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve. And I find that makes decisions and hard conversations much, much easier. And I think that has allowed me to always build a better team around me because I don't sit there pontificating and talking about it. I'm action orientated and focused. So I'll make that decision quick, and then I'll move on and put the team hopefully in a better position. So I think that's probably been one of the big differences. I used to do that so easily in sport, because in sport, right, it's so black and white. It's either you win or lose. If someone's not good enough, get off the team. If you don't make the top two, see you in 4 years' time. You can try and qualify for the Olympic Games then. But in business, there's a lot more grey, and you've kind of got to figure that out for yourself, and it's a bit of a journey, that part.
So your business is growing. You've been on the front foot through this recent period, and I think we've seen many people take a back step, whereas you've been front-footed and you've been growing the business, and you've been driving the business forward with your usual discipline, focus, energy, passion. How do you communicate and take your team on the journey with you?
I think first and foremost, I'm genuine. So what I say, I believe in, and I put my own actions behind that. So I think that's first and foremost. To any sort of level of success, there needs to be genuineness and integrity attached to it. Otherwise, people are never going to sign up for it. So that's the first part of the ingredient that you need to put in. When we went through COVID, particularly in March, and, I basically run a quasi funds management business, and obviously markets were going down 6 or 7% some days in March. It was a really scary, stressful time. So first and foremost, we had to put the business, the risk management was first and foremost, and we put everything in place there, and we worked very collaboratively as a team. And I think that actually bonded us. I think we came together really well. We then all of a sudden were in a situation where markets were collapsing, but guess what? None of you can work in the office together. So why don't you go try doing this from home? So it's like, okay, server upgrades. Has everyone got their tools of trade? The IT, is a platform going to work? What about all our third-party services? Have they got the ability to be able to operate in this environment? So let's throw that layer of stress in there. Now, that forced us to look at our operational processes and re-engineer a lot of them, and we actually improved them. So we created better customer experience, and we also created more efficiency inside the business. So that whole re-engineering thing was a good thing. So again, that was another bonding opportunity for the team. And then in a strategic sense, what we did is we sat down and went, well, what does this mean for us? We've got to model out worst case, best case, base case sort of scenarios, and look at your capital, your liquidity, your financial, profitability. What's that going to look like? Okay, we can manage this first and foremost. So we're in a good position. We don't necessarily need to make redundancies. We might need to force some people on leave or do some things like that, but the balance sheet looks pretty good and we don't have any debt in the business. So you kind of tick all those boxes. And then we came to a choice where we said, well, from a sales and marketing point of view, we can either sit here and play defensively and be really conservative. And we were hearing that a lot of other BDMs and distribution people were saying, look, don't contact people at the moment. There's a lot going on. Everyone's got a lot on their plate. And we went, no, this is the time to over-communicate, engage all our partners, talk to people about what's going on in the industry. How can we help them? How can we support them? What's the virtual marketing strategy instead of the physical marketing strategy that we were obviously adopting for years before that? We've never had a full virtual marketing strategy or sales strategy. And we went hard on that. We said, we're going to attack this, and we're going to play offense. We're not going to play defense, because you know what? You play defense, you always end up losing. And in these situations, whether it was 1928, whether it's 1963 when JFK, markets fell in, 1973 oil crisis, 1987, 1997, you look at the Asian crisis, 2001, 2008, all these crises. There has been winners and losers. Some people come out on the other side of this and they're super successful, and their business has never been in a better position because they captured opportunity and saw opportunity. And so I guess as a leader and as a person who's passionate about business and success, I was like, well, why don't we make that choice? Because that one looks a lot more exciting. And we're actually in a good position because we've done all our risk management. We've done the full analysis of our business. We're in a good position. Let's attack. And we did. And the ironic thing about it, after 17 years of being in business with this particular company, we had our biggest quarter that we've ever had. Q4 of FY20 was a record quarter for us. It was a record sales year. We were up 48% on the previous year. We had a record NPAT. Pretty much every single major metric we had in the business was a record. And we've continued with the same momentum into FY21. Now, the next challenge is COVID fatigue, particularly as a business that's predominantly based out of Melbourne. How do we continue to maintain that step change and also continue to improve and innovate and do new things? That's the constant challenge of any sort of success, right? But I think the environment actually made us more cohesive, and we all made this conscious choice as a business to either play to that or play to that, and we all signed up for it. And to be honest, I look back on it and it was kind of easy from a people point of view because everyone was keen. Like everyone, we had the right people on the team. So everyone was keen to go, yeah, let's have a real crack at this. Let's work together. Let's fail fast. If we do something wrong, let's move on and put it behind us and then, go in another direction. And I just learned so much as a leader too, about people, about myself, about business. And you look at some other businesses which didn't make those conscious choices, and you always have a choice even in those dire situations.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely phenomenal advice, Grant, and a beautiful place to finish. That it is about being very, very clear, but living life to win. And being on the front foot and being on the offensive and thinking about what's the best that can happen, and then putting the clear strategies in place behind that, communicating effectively and working exceptionally hard to go after it. And I just want to end by saying, I saw you in the early part of your business career, and I just knew you would be absolutely successful because everything you've said, I saw you putting that work in. It was like, as you said, the same disciplines to go and get yourself to be the best at your new trade. And I saw that work ethic, and I saw that discipline, and I saw that desire to learn and the growth mindset. And also I've seen you at different times. I remember, we had a dinner in Melbourne one night, just you and I, and it was very quiet, a little backstreet, little restaurant. And it was like, wow, a window into the world of Grant Hackett, where you couldn't even move without every, And I remember just the conversation we had that night, and I just thought, this guy is just pure class. And to see you now, happy in life, succeeding in life, the CEO of the business with a real growth trajectory, the family around you that you clearly love and adore. And I just think the next 10 years for Grant Hackett is something that people just need to look out for. And it's been absolutely brilliant. I cannot thank you enough. I've learned so much, and it's just a real privilege to be chatting with you once again, mate.
Mate, thanks so much for saying that. You said some very kind things, and really, really appreciate that. And you know what? If I knew that at the time we were working together, I probably would have asked for a bigger bonus. But anyway, I've moved on. Thank you so much.
I should ask you for the list of all the things I wasn't doing very well.
No, you don't need to. I learn a lot of you, like I have every other leader that I've worked for. And, it's really funny. Everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses. And all we're trying to do is bring up our weaknesses and make them a little bit more reliable and continue to grow our strengths, right? So, and the more you listen and stay in tune with people, the more you get out of it. And look, I always say you learn just as much from losers as you do winners too, because you want to look at what you shouldn't be doing just as much as what you should be doing.
100%.